I think education and changing the stigma and taboo is like our responsibility, right? I don't want our kids to look at this as drugs or taboo.
If once they're old enough to ask the question, they're old enough to hear the answer.
So what we found was that actually breast milk has endocannabinoids in there.
So in today's episode, we're going to be talking about addressing medical marijuana stigmas with parenting. And today we have team members here. All of us are parents. And we're going to have a little discussion about just kind of what that looks like. So some of the things we are going to discuss, though, are some of our personal experiences, navigating some of the stigmas in society that we have to deal with this, some of the practical aspects of using medical marijuana as a parent, and maybe just some advice that we can maybe give to some other parents that are in a similar position that may be kind of concerned about this. So I just want to kick it off with our first question. So as a parent, what were some of your initial concerns about using medical marijuana as a parent and having kids around while having that?
Well, can I go first? Because I think we should introduce who we are, right?
Yeah, I guess so.
My wife, Laura, right? Across, we have 3 children, 2 who she birthed in a bathtub at home with no epidural. She's a rock star. We have Jamie, patient advocate here, and you have 2 children as well, boy and a girl, best of both worlds. So, and now we should talk about whatever the question was. So,
yes. So, all right. So yeah. So
not on any products yet.
and I have 2 kids myself.
Oh, yes, sorry. Yeah,
I got 2 kids. My name's Chad Taylor. If anybody doesn't know, I got 2 kids. Yeah. So what are some of the initial concerns that we may have had jumping into this with kids? Because it's different before kids, and now that we have kids, I know that may have some concerns. What were those? What did that look like?
Well, I think for me personally, when I started really discovering cannabis, I was really the beginning stages of my breastfeeding journey with my first daughter. So my initial concern was, is this safe for me to do while breastfeeding? Is my baby going to absorb this? What is going to happen? So back then there wasn't a lot of information out there, but there was enough. So I remember we started researching and kind of diving into and seeing, well, let's see, is this safe? And what we found was that actually breast milk has endocannabinoids in there. So, and they're actually responsible for teaching the baby how to nurse and actually teaching the baby to be hungry. So, and really it's just setting them up for growth and development. So it's very similar to how adults get the munchies. Basically the endocannabinoids in our breast milk is teaching babies to get the munchies and want to nurse and feed. So I think once we kind of discovered that, we're like, let's try it. So that was my initial concern, was really if it was safe, and we found out that it was very safe to use while breastfeeding.
You'll have a lot of doctors that will talk about don't use cannabis or THC while breastfeeding because it'll definitely end up in the breast milk, but little do they know that it's already there, right? So THC is in all of our systems. We all have very similar cannabinoids that are in the plant. There's 160 in the plant. So when you take the plant, reintroduce into your body, you're basically fueling your system's natural ability to balance and heal. So it was very interesting that we found that information out.
Yeah.
So.
And I find it interesting that doctors will say that, because when you ask them, how much training did you get in cannabis in medical school?
Yeah, or your endocannabinoid system itself.
Yeah. Exactly.
I mean, obviously, we're fast forward 7 years now, so that we've come a long way. But there's still some taboo and stigma that needs to change for sure.
100%. 100%.
When my kids were young, I was really concerned about getting in trouble, like smoking marijuana or doing edibles. That was my biggest concern, because it was still illegal and they were really young, and I was really private about what I did. I didn't do anything around my kids. I was always very private about certain things, just because of the stigma, and I didn't want to get in trouble or anything at the time.
I think education and changing the stigma and taboo is like our responsibility, right? Making sure that they understand that it's medicine, making sure they understand not to touch it, right? So it is very safe, regardless. I mean, obviously you don't want your kid to get into a THC gummy or something like that. But there's still 0 deaths associated with marijuana. So you have people that have medicine cabinets full of narcotics and barbiturates that, if heaven forbid, they fall into into the hands of a young child and it ends up in their mouth, the dangerous side effects that could happen, right? So with a THC gummy, the kid just will end up having to sleep. So, obviously I don't, condone that. But anyway.
Narcotics could be very detrimental to
Absolutely.
children,
Yeah.
but,
Definitely.
marijuana isn't detrimental to children if they accidentally get into it. So.
We were very open, right? Obviously, we're in the space. We started back in 2016. We were very open with our children, and we have pictures of our kids holding a pound of flour. I didn't post it to social media. I didn't want DCF.
You have pictures.
I do have pictures. Yeah, but I don't want our kids to look at this as drugs or taboo. So
really bad when
speaking
it's
of DCF, I mean, we've had cases where parents would come in because the DCF was involved, or they ended up taking a drug test for DCF and they tested positive for THC. So, it's very unfortunate. But once you get your medical marijuana card, you are protected, under the constitutional amendment. So people should obviously know that. And then we've had DCF agents come in and get certified too. So I think. One of the funniest stories of our history out of the 42,000 patients we've certified is we had one day where the DCF agent was in here being certified with the mom that she was investigating, sitting side by side in the waiting room.
That's
so
awesome.
That was pretty amazing to be a part of that. They were both standing there trying to, but it is what it is. There's only so much, we can do to, kind of block the privacy there in a waiting room. But it was kind of a funny story. I thought that I would throw that in there. So.
No, I love that. Yeah, and it's funny because I kind of have a blend of journeys. With me personally, I was pretty discreet at first, but my whole parenting philosophy has always been, if once they're old enough to ask the question, they're old enough to hear the answer. Just at their level, right? And one day, my son saw me with my products, and I said, "All right, well, it's time to have the talk." And we had a nice long talk, and I broke down, how I use it, why I use it, how it helps me, and how it's gotten us, this family, farther away from the synthetic pharmaceuticals that the doctors were trying to put me on, and I was not going to have it. And I kind of had that, and he was old enough to have that conversation. I think he was 12 at the time. He's a pretty mature 12-year-old, thankfully. But yeah, and we're just very open about it as a family, is because you're right. The more that we start to normalize it as parents and talk about it, what it really is, which is a medicine that helps thousands of people, and it's education. And when we educate our kids properly with confidence, we don't have to worry about them. I don't have to worry about my kids sneaking into my products and trying to take. He knows what this is, but he was taught for such a young age that it's not really an issue. And so I think that's really important.
Yeah, we have a 16-year-old son at home, and he's been with us through this entire journey of establishing Mind Florida Green back in 2016. So he's seen me up on stage, talking with other medical professionals in front of groups of 200-300 people. So we kind of had no choice. And it's once he started going to middle school, he had kids trying to sell him vapes and stuff like that, and it does start young, and. Funny story is, he'd come on and be like, don't you know, I tell these kids, Dad, don't you know who my dad is? So it's kind of funny, but he got an education, not necessarily by choice. He had no choice, but I think it's good. I think parents need to talk to their children, especially teenagers. It's definitely out there. These kids are getting on Netflix and watching the specials, and they're smarter than we are, and they're realizing that, that this stuff is not this dangerous, drug. But parents do need to be responsible. Definitely keep the products in their, packaging, especially from the dispensaries. They all usually will have child lock on the top of it. Leaving a bunch of flour around. I mean, we don't necessarily leave pounds of flour out at our house unless I'm having some people over for shock value, for education, but it's not that complicated to explain to a child that this stuff's medicine, and obviously it's been easier for us because our kids have kind of grown up in the space. So, but parents shouldn't be embarrassed either. I don't think and I think that's the taboo and stigma that we need to kind of push through is don't be embarrassed because this stuff is pretty amazing.